We cross live to SABC News economics reporter Municipal, who is there. Municipal, infrastructure is obviously a major problem in the country, but we've also got the low rate of, the high rate at least, of unemployment. Is the summit going to be addressing this as part of the summit?
Indeed, Juliet, unemployment is something that has come up high in terms of this inaugural infrastructure summit, how to get growth in order to create those jobs. And we've heard from some of the experts that we've spoken to that job creation comes in many forms. That can be the maintenance of some of the buildings that are dilapidated and that need painting for in one instance, or just other maintenance work. So there is work to be done and work to be found when it comes to job creation and economic growth under infrastructure. But of course we've spoken to the various stakeholders involved, and we continue to speak to the stakeholders involved during this summit today here at the Sandton Convention Centre. And I'm going to turn now to the CEO of the South African Housing and Infrastructure Fund, Rali Mampeule. Rali, a very good day to you, and thank you so much for your time. Maybe start with your organization's function within this ecosystem.
Yeah, well, good afternoon to viewers. We are the South African Housing and Infrastructure Fund, and essentially what we're doing, we're trying to accelerate delivery of affordable housing. While we're doing that, we want to make sure that the people that we put into these houses, we can connect them into internet. So we've invested in various digital infrastructure businesses, but we are also in a space where we are saying that South Africa has got solutions. I think in this summit, we've been talking about a lot of challenges, and part of what we want to do is to say the solutions are also with the private sector, because we think that the private sector, capital, one, but also the private sector's skill set can actually be able to help the ambitions that we have as a country in terms of infrastructure development.
And talk to us about how we then turn those ideas into action.
No, definitely. We attend a lot of summit and conferences around the world. Part of what we've realized is that a lot of the time when we go to places like World Economic Forum, people are always asking us about the risk in the continent and in South Africa. And we're of the view that South Africa has got some solutions for themselves as well. Foreign direct investment is very important for any country in the world. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for that, we should look at how do we deal with what we have here. If you look at the stats now, that our people have spent almost 1.1 trillion in the financial year of 2024 and 25, 1 trillion on online gambling. What does that tell us? It tells us that the people, the 20 rands of Ukok on the street, in a township somewhere, can be able to help us to get where we want to get to. There are technologies. You look at big investment firms that are infrastructure, like your BlackRock. They're now looking at digital way of how do we work on the financial space to actually get the man on the street to invest in their own infrastructure in the country. So we have the view that some of the solutions are here. So we are quite excited to come up with innovative financial models within the infrastructure space to be able to solve our own problems in the country.
You talk about solutions, but maybe let's also talk about the state of the sector. What is the state of infrastructure in South Africa?
You and I, when we drove here, we probably passed through a pothole and the traffic lights are not working. These are serious things that we need to look at. I think if you look at places like, so we have the view that there are some infrastructure challenges, water, sewer, and electricity that we all know about, and I'm sure most people spoke about. But one of the things that we're looking at is to say, how do we resolve that? We think that our municipalities need to be able to be helped. We need to be able to get more skills to assist and back them up than just pointing fingers. I think one of the things that we need to do, as I said earlier on, is to say, how do we create something like an agency? So we have the view that the president is looking at different agencies that he wants to create. But we have the view that he needs to create, it all starts with the municipalities. If the municipalities doesn't approve your project or your huge infrastructure development that you're doing, you're stuck. So we think the president should look at opportunities where he can create a municipal agency, just like the Housing Development Agency, or give it to the Housing Development Agency to be able to focus on approving all the plans so that we can be able to put South Africa into a construction site. If that doesn't happen, we can all talk about the big project, the smart city, the bullet train, but if the mayor and the city manager in Zanin does not approve that plan, we're in trouble. So we think there should be an agency that specifically deals in approving projects so that we can put South Africa back into a construction space.
But you also seems like you're highlighting collaboration, because joining forces would help us get around some of the issues that we face.
No, definitely. And the great thing about it is that the public sector minister and the team are really saying that they don't have all the answers as well. And they enhance this inaugural summit so that we can share ideas. But I think it must really not become another talk show, as everybody will say, and really look at the things. One of the things that we're saying is that, do the boring things. Do the boring things. It's all great to talk about 950 billion, but we need to talk about the ground. Somebody who's watching this in Mujaji is asking us himself to say, I just had a puncher. So we need to start there now, immediately, before we can even start looking at doing bigger projects, or do them simultaneously. So let's go back and find new innovation ways of how we can raise capital in this country and be able to create an agency. So we are calling as a private sector for an agency by government that can take over the role of approving projects in the country. Because currently now, just to give you an example, it can take you up to 5 years, sometime at a worst case scenario, to get a mere 1,000 units development to be approved. Not because the municipality doesn't want to do that. The skill sets could be lacking, and probably the budgets maybe as well. So we need to find ways to see how we can match each other's skills and the private sector capital.
And then just your thoughts about going forward then. As you mentioned, this is the inaugural summit, and actually a question that was posed by my colleague Juliet was that of jobs. How is this going to enable that economic growth that we want, stimulate that growth that will then create the jobs that we need?
No, definitely. I mean, again, we're of the view, I'm an entrepreneur, I like to give solutions. We're of the view that we need to look at the basic things. One of the things that we are looking at is that we've invested in hardware companies, whereby we are now saying, as we do the developments, there should be an infrastructure or industrial development next to that development, where you first create the economic a hub with the school and your social amenities so they can create jobs, but also industrial side where our people can do a mere things like a broom that we buy at a hardware. If you go to places like China, you find a small family just working on doing the wood part of it, another family working on the side of doing the other part of the broom, and then you put them together, you put it into a hardware, you're creating jobs and opportunities for people. So I think those are some of the lower boring things that we're looking at as entrepreneurs to say, how do we resolve those problems while we're accelerating delivery of affordable housing?
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Rali. That was Rali Mampeule, CEO of SAHIF, the South African Housing and Infrastructure Fund, talking to us, giving his reflections on those solutions that we so urgently need when it comes to infrastructure, also just laying the foundation for what the infrastructure sector looks like, and also how we can stimulate economic growth to create the jobs that we so desperately need in this country. Back to you in studio, Juliet.
Thank you very much for that. At the reporting live from the inaugural Public Works Infrastructure Summit in Johannesburg.